Good morning, everyone. I'd like to especially welcome our guests who are here for the first time, and we would love to meet you. So after service, if you would like to introduce yourself to us as we are in the foyer, we would be happy to meet you. This morning's reading is actually enough spiritual teaching to help us find God. If we had nothing else and went deeply into this reading, we would get to the goal. And this path, as you all know, is the path of self-realization. What does that mean exactly? If you think about it, it means, well, yoga samadhi, union with God, expansion of consciousness, to feel an awareness of every atom of space as your own. Can you envision such a state of cosmic consciousness? It's mind-boggling. Yogananda said, we're not even omnipresent in our own bodies. But our destiny is to be omnipresent in all of the creation, to feel it as our own. Yogananda, when he was older, at the end of his life, he would sometimes walk with his arm on someone else's arm to steady him, because he said, I am in all bodies. It's hard to remember which body I'm supposed to keep moving. So that is our goal. Reminds me of an old joke that I just really love. The Buddhist goes to the hot dog vendor and says, make me one with everything. And that's what we're going to our guru for. Make me one with everything that is. Like the festival says, you are a part of all that is. Well, that's, from where we are right now, that's a little bit of a stretch. How do we get to that consciousness? Well, Mary exemplifies the meditation aspect. Concentration, absorption, perfect stillness, love. She was sitting there in perfect meditation at the feet of God incarnate. That's what we want to be. And then there's Martha. Martha had energy. She had gotten herself to the point where she had drawn this incredible blessing of being with Jesus Christ. And she was serving. She was working. She had all the pots bubbling. She had her energy up and dynamic, even strong enough to face Christ and say, ask my sister to come and help me with this. Not a little wimpy person. She was a strong person. And that's what we need to be. We need to get our energy up so that we are vibrant and we are alive with energy and magnetism. And then, as Jesus was telling Martha, you need to have the one needful. He wasn't telling her don't serve, sit like Mary. What are you kidding? You shouldn't be in the kitchen, be here. No, everybody needed to be fed. He wasn't denying that. He was saying, do your activity. Put all your heart into it. Put all your energy and magnetism and grow your magnetism. That's how you will draw the divine grace. But in the midst of your activity, remember who you're doing it for. Martha was serving the Son of God, but she was just concentrated on getting the pasta ready on time or whatever she was cooking. She needed to remember who she was serving. And that's what we need to do. Get our energy up and remember in every moment, in every thought, in every feeling, in every action, who we are doing it for. I was thinking about how we meditate and we feel that touch of God's blessing. We feel some peace or some joy. And then we go out into the world and we get caught up in all the activity. We need to practice keeping that joy, keeping that memory of who we're serving, who we want to feel. It's a little bit like practicing samadhi. In Sabikalpa Samadhi, the masters tell us, we experience cosmic consciousness. But it's a lower samadhi and we lose it. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, we experience that cosmic consciousness and it never leaves us. So in a way, even at the stage where our consciousness is now, we are practicing that. Staying in that consciousness of God. We will get there eventually. Why not today? Practice today for that moment when we have the cosmic experience and we won't lose it. We'll stay in that consciousness. We have Swami's picture here, the founder of Ananda. It was his birthday yesterday. We celebrated Friday night. And he gave us a wonderful clue to how to practice the presence of God, how to keep God in our minds, how to experience a feeling and immediately say, God, what do you want? Swami would say, in everything, think, what would Yogananda do? What would Yogananda feel? What would he think? How would he act? If we can keep our minds focused on the divine, no matter what we're doing, why would we want to do that? Because we will experience joy, freedom of fear, freedom of death itself, bliss. Everything that we need is given to us. That is the fruit of the spiritual life. Why live in pain and fear of death and fear of everything? God is our security, as this affirmation said. God is the foundation. If we tune into spirit, we have the resources of the infinite at our disposal. Like this beautiful Gita reading says, basically, be even-minded. Don't be wildly crazy with ecstasy when you get a tax return or something, or completely depressed because you're stuck in traffic. The highs and lows of life when you become even-minded, it doesn't mean that you become numb. Rather, it's because you are practicing even-mindedness so that you can be calm, so that you can act from your center and be much more effective when the highs and lows and troubles of life afflict you. As Yogananda said, and as I have often quoted because it's tattooed on my heart, we need to stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. That's how calm we need to be. That's how centered. That's the inner tranquility that we want to cultivate. And so this reading is saying, he who is free from egoic desires and their attendant fear and anger, that person has steady discrimination. If we live in the lower chakras, concerned with materialism, what's in it for me, what do I want, what are my needs, I have to grasp at money and people and things, and I have to think of my own safety and my own well-being, that just creates tension. It just creates pain. Because as we all know, nothing is secure in this world. Money comes and money goes. People come, people go. Job, health, security, whatever it is, it's all unstable, like a drop of water on a lotus leaf. What is stable is the consciousness of God. And the more we tune into that, the happier we will be. Give yourself into that consciousness. Don't be afraid. It is your very own. The ego, like the Gita says, it just brings fear and anger. Who wants that? Who needs it? Let it go. Immerse yourself in the divine vibration. Give yourself to God. And think of all things as coming from Him for your highest good. I was remembering a funny little story this morning. This happened to a friend of mine, and when we were first starting Ananda, we lived in, shall we say, rustic conditions. I remember I lived in a log cabin, and where there was a knothole in the logs, you could see right outside. And so my friend lived in a place even worse than that. And one night he was sitting at his table, and he had having a cup of tea. And he had the honey jar sitting there, and he had leaned the spoon up against the honey jar. And he was sitting there very quietly when a little mouse ran up on the table, ran up the spoon, and fell into the honey jar. And he's acting quickly. He grabbed the honey jar and the spoon, took the little mouse outside, and put him on the ground. And then he ran back inside and got some warm water, and he came back and he poured it on the little mouse because the mouse was immobilized from the honey. And so he poured the water on the little mouse, and pretty soon the little mouse could start to move again. And then the mouse got really angry at my friend. It was like he was shaking his little fist at him. How could you do this to me, you know? First I'm in the goo, and then I'm flying through the air, and then I'm dumped on the ground, and then you're pouring water all over me. And the little mouse just sort of was really mad and stomped off. And I was thinking, that's so much like us. Things happen to us. We think we're blameless. Why is God doing this to me? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? It's really, we were the ones who fell in the honey jar. God scooped us out. He took us outside. He poured warm water on us so we could breathe, so we could move. He is guiding every step of our lives. Even the things that don't feel good, that seem crazy, that don't work, that we don't like, even especially those things, are God's way of helping us grow, helping us go in the right direction, lovingly guiding us. So embrace everything that happens as God's will for you. Thank God for everything and let Him be the guiding force in your life. With devotion, devotion also means commitment. Be devoted to your spiritual life. Even if you don't feel overwhelming, ecstatic love for God, make the commitment. Turn towards Him and ask for His blessing on your life.
These two chants that we sang just before the meditation today capture interesting angles on the topic. The first of them, I am Om, shows us how to create an identity that is bigger than just this body or these circumstances. Nirmala was pointing out that our lives are going to go up and down. The circumstances of our lives are going to go up and down. There will be change. In fact, we could summarize by saying that the only constant in our lives will be change, is change. And yet, on the inside, we can find that stability in omnipresence. If our body or our consciousness is as large as the universe, what are we going to be afraid of exactly? What, if a galaxy decides to explode one fine day, that's just one little molecule of our consciousness. It's minimal by comparison. So we have to learn to broaden, and this is an example that Swamiji gave us very beautifully in his life. I'll give you one example of that. He was struggling, we all collectively were struggling with lawsuits in the 1990s and difficult financial circumstances related to that. Well, at the same time that was going on, an earthquake happened in Italy, in the vicinity where we have a center and a community outside of Assisi. And the area was fairly devastated. He had just built a home there. He had built it in such a way as a kind of example of a way of constructing that is not susceptible to the damage of earthquake, and in fact it was not damaged at all. But he felt very compassionately towards the people in that area. So even in the middle of all this commotion that was going on this side of the ocean, he decided to do a series of concerts to raise money. He called the series Hope and Homes for Italy, and raised a bunch of money, sent the money over there. The Italian officials were not entirely pleased with that because they didn't feel that they needed foreign funds. Thank you very much. We're all very well here, even if our town fell down and things are sort of a mess. But it was an interesting example of how it's possible to be very active in the middle of difficulty and be centered at the same time. The second chant, Blue Lotus Feet, engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother, reminds me of a story related to another chant that's a little bit similar. Swamiji wrote another chant, I want only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. It's a beautiful chant affirming that connectedness with the divine. Well, one of my friends was contemplating that chant, and during a question and answer session with Swamiji, he said, "But Swami, I don't want only thee. There's a lot of things I want in life, I mean, and what? So am I being insincere when I sing, 'I want only thee, Lord, thee only thee'? If I don't really just want thee, only thee." And Swami sort of laughed and he said, "What you don't realize is you actually do want only thee. It's just that you're putting boxes and frames around that. Well, I want only thee, but in the form of this new car, or in the form of this new job, or this new situation, or this, health that I affirm to be better than it is, whatever it may be, there's always something sort of percolating in the back of our minds. And if we can sing to the Divine Mother, 'Engrossed is the bee of my mind,' even if it's only occasionally engrossed, or even if while it's engrossed, it's not entirely engrossed, it's sort of fluctuating back and forth a little bit. Nevertheless, to have the affirmation is to affirm a truth. The song that the choir sang at the beginning, "Praise ye the Lord." It's interesting. That word praise is kind of a loaded one. Yogananda had a cute way of putting this. He said, when people say praise the Lord, he said, it makes me wonder if God is some pampered old lady, that requires praise continuously, like a dish full of bonbons next by her, or something. And what he was driving at is that there's, in the state of inner communion, praise and awe are our natural state. When we go into a state of deep meditation, literally, it takes our breath away. Literally, it takes our breath away in joy. And it is not to say that we're holding our breaths and going, "Oh, I have to breathe now." It's that there is this stillness that is so profound that we don't need to breathe, we don't need to move, we don't need to go anywhere. Our heart and our energy is just rising, naturally rising, like the fire that we used in the fire ceremony. That fire is rising up naturally. Our devotion rises naturally. That rising energy can actually overcome gravity. When we lived in Assisi, we visited the rooms in the little apartment. It was what you might call a deluxe prison of St. Joseph of Cupertino, who at that time was living in Assisi. He kept kind of getting shuttled around because the church found his example a little bit inconvenient, because he had this habit during the Mass of going into ecstasy, and he would levitate off the ground. And he would fly up in the air, and they just didn't know what to do with this. And of course, people came from from miles around. I mean, you can imagine, the word sort of spread a little bit, like, there's something a little bit unusual happening here, and you might want to check this out. There's a story also, I don't know if it's apocryphal. Even if it is apocryphal, it's colorful. There's a story of a Lutheran who came down from Germany to expose this fraud. And the story was that he came to the Mass, Joseph saw him and understood intuitively what he was there for, grabbed the man by the hand. They both went up in the air. The man went up a Lutheran and came down a Catholic. And, well, we're all a little bit like that skeptic in some ways, We're sort of a little bit suspicious. God, what are you trying to pull over on me? Like the little mouse in Nirmala's story, Never mind that we got stuck in the honey. Never mind that we've wandered our way into the labyrinth of life. But this attitude shift that can happen, we got to see an example of that in Swamiji's life. He chose the name Kriyananda. Kriya Ananda, in a sense, you could say. Kriya meaning a specific kind of action, action that leads to freedom, action that leads back out of the labyrinth, and Ananda, bliss through that particular kind of action. And his life was a dynamic expression of that. He showed us through his life how to think bigger than our own circumstances. When we lived with him in India, we had to sort of become known. We could not sort of be shrinking little wallflowers, particularly not in his presence, because he was determined to do public lectures, publish books, be on television. I mean, it required a dynamic output of energy. I remember in one case, we had a public function in Mumbai, and we had chosen the most beautiful hall in the city, the Performing Arts Center, where famous operas have been performed. You know, entire orchestras can be situated on the dais that can be lowered down or raised up to become part of the stage. I mean, it was an awesome hall. And it had 1,108 seats in it. And we were determined on 6 weeks' notice to fill every one of those 1,108 seats. And so a little group of us got together, and I said, "What's it going to take?" And they said, "A whole lot of energy and a whole lot of money too." But we did. We actually filled that hall. In a few weeks, we will have a similar opportunity here in Sacramento. We won't have Swami Kriyananda here in human form, but we will have his spirit in the form of a yoga festival in Folsom that we're putting on. And we have a large hall. It doesn't have a specific number of chairs. There are as many chairs as we will require. But after service, if you want to stick around and find a way to help with that, you would be most welcome. But it's an opportunity for us to expand the horizons of our consciousness above and beyond, above what we know presently, above what we think of as, this is my life, this is my consciousness, this is what I'm capable of. We are capable of so much more. And let's embrace that. Let's embrace that reality in every step of our lives. Meditation helps that, but we're not busy meditating 24 hours a day. We are busy doing lots of things. We're even busy sleeping for part of that time. But during that time too, we have the opportunity, as we go to sleep, we can affirm, Divine Mother, I'm more than this body. I'm more than my circumstances. Help me to achieve that. Help me to know your grace and your blessing. Let us learn from the example of Swamiji, and those of us who knew him can carry more of that with us and share it with others. But those of us who didn't know him personally, feel the energy of the music, of the chants, of the Festival of Light that we'll do in a few moments. Feel the energy of everything that's here. That came in some way from Yogananda through Swamiji and to all of us. Feel that and bask in it and share it to the degree that you feel to with others. Blessing upon blessing will be the result of that. Namaste.